Are you a hobbyist who has suffered from a ruined paint job because your decals are a little too glossy? Are you trying to achieve that painted-on effect but cannot seem to get it just right? According to the Federal Bureau of Hobbyists, thousands suffer from GDS, a terrible affliction that leaves your decals, well, a little too glossy. And everyone will see that unsightly flashing. But hope is on the horizon. A simple but effective technique can be used to elevate your decal game and get your confidence back. Stay tuned to see how we at Barely Battle Ready can be of assistance.
Welcome to Barely Battle Ready. Chuck here as always, and today I would like to share a video with you all about the application of decals, or as they are commonly referred to as water slide transfers. I'm going to illustrate using the same decal over the same base color. However, one side is going to leverage an airbrush while the other side is going to use a hand brush. First and foremost though, I'd like to give credit to my buddy Seth. He saw my models, saw how I was applying my decals, and offered up his knowledge and his techniques to help level up my hobby game. So in turn, I would like to share that technique with you all to help level up your game. So let's jump right into it.
First, let's cover the supplies needed. Some of the items that I use are a solution, which is called Microsol, and also Microset. In this particular video, I'm using a Liquitex Gloss Varnish. Additionally, I will be using this Vallejo brand matte varnish. You're going to need a paintbrush of some sort. I just happen to use this number 4. You'll need to use a X-Acto knife, of course, to cut out the water slide transfers. A pair of tweezers to be able to handle them. You're going to need a little reservoir of water, the decals themselves, and whichever model or models that you are applying the decals to. Please be sure to test the techniques from this video out on an old model or some plastic card before you go all in on your masterpiece. Practice makes perfect, and this is no exception. Step 1 is to generously coat the areas where the decals will be placed with gloss varnish. Make sure to allow the varnish to dry completely before moving on to the next step. I previously prepared a piece of plastic card with my base coats and covered each section with a generous coat of gloss varnish. I applied 2 coats with the airbrush on the left and by hand on the right. Quick note, I want to illustrate how important the surface area is when you are ready to apply your decals, so the hand application is a little more messy on purpose. Although you can achieve the same results as the airbrush by hand, you will just need to ensure that you smooth out your coats to mitigate visible brush lines. Step 2. Prepping the decal for application. After cutting out the decals that I am going to use, I have added a little tap water to my reservoir. One quick tip when submerging your decals into water. The shallower your water reservoir is, the easier it will be to remove the decal when ready. If you use a large cup, sometimes the decals will sink to the bottom and make removing them much more difficult, especially if the decal separates from the paper backing. Here, we begin the process by submerging the decal into the water. I push the decal down with the tweezers to ensure that the entirety of the decal is submerged. Once the decal is wet, it will begin to release from the paper backing. Please note that the amount of time needed to release from the paper backing is not always the same. However, in my experience, generally 20 to 30 seconds is all that it takes. To test to see if the decal is ready to be applied to my model, I will use my pair of tweezers to gently pull and push against the decal to see if it starts to shift off of the paper backing. If the decal is immobile, I will wait a little longer and try again. When the decal begins to shift easily from side to side or up and down on the paper backing, then I know it is ready to be applied. Step 3. Placing the decal onto the model. I prepare the surface by brushing a coat of Microsol to the area of the model where the decal will be placed. The coat of Microsol will be larger than the size of the decal in case I need to adjust where the decal is positioned. Do not worry, when the solution dries, it will not be visible. When the decal is ready, I will gently push the decal to one side of the paper back, then grab the decal with my tweezers from the opposite corner. I do this to mitigate grabbing the flashing around the decal with the tweezers. I gently touch a corner of the decal to a paper towel to remove some of the excess water, and then use the brush to push the decal off the paper backing and onto my model. If the decal is not in the position you want it to be in, you can use your brush or a pair of tweezers and a little water to float the decal and move it into the correct position. I will use my paper towel to absorb some of the excess water around the edges of the decal that is left from positioning, and to help speed up the drying time. Be very careful about blotting your decals with a paper towel. I've had some rare experiences when the decal will attach itself to the paper towel if I am too aggressive with the blotting. Step 4. Apply a thin coat of microsol and microset. Once I am happy with the positioning of the decal, I will put on a light coat of microsol over the entirety of the decal. Then I let the solution soak in and evaporate. Once it is completely dry, I can move on to the next step. After the microsol is completely dry, I will then add a coat of microset over the top of the decals and again let the solution soak in and evaporate. Once it is completely dry, move on to the next step. Step 5. Apply your matte varnish. Again, in this video, I am using an airbrush for one side of the example and a hand brush for the other. I apply a generous coat of matte varnish, which will dull the gloss and hide the flashing around the edges of the decal to provide that painted on look. Let the coat of matte varnish dry, and that is it. Here is the results of my examples. You will notice that in the example with the airbrush, it is slightly better than the brush side due to the smoothness of the surface area where the decal is applied. The brush side also looks pretty good, but again, due to the surface area, you can more easily see the flashing around the decal. It is faint, but still there. As a reference, here is a decal that I applied prior to learning this technique and the example from this video. You can clearly see the difference this technique has on the end result. Additionally, I have used the word flashing throughout this video. In this example, you can clearly see what flashing is. I hope that you all found this little guide helpful to help level up your hobby game. Thank you for viewing, and keep a lookout for more hobby tips in the future.